Alright, so over the past week I've gotten a lot done, and going over it in detail would take way too long, so I'm just gonna go through it as quick as I can and go into more detail on some of the more important things. So on Saturday, after I released the devlog, last week's devlog, I implemented the weapons system, and I added the broadsword, which does like a 3-tile splash damage, and I added the scoring system. Sunday, I added the lance weapon, which does a 2-tile forward splash damage, the water elemental, the air elemental, and I added a couple new runes. And on Monday, I really didn't do a lot other than finish Forgehead's theme, and I recorded a little segment going over how exactly I took care of that and what the musical ideas behind it were. Alright, so Forgehead's theme has 2 very distinct melodies. The first one, which is the most recurring one, and we have the other one, the second melody, which is a lot more energetic. So these 2 melodies both work in very distinct ways. The first one directly follows the chord progression that I have laid out. The second one kind of follows it, but it sticks to a slightly different scale than the original is in. So the first melody, well, before I talk about the first melody, let's actually talk about the chords. So the chords for the original Dungeon & Spooky Boys Deluxe game were this. So those were the original chords. They have a pretty evil, distinct sound to them. So they have the minor 1, major 6, major 6, major 5. So in order to take the edge off of that starting minor 1 chord, I added the 7. I kept the major 6 chords, and then instead of having the major 5, I had the minor 5, and again that had the 7th put onto it. So that just takes the edge off of it and makes it feel a little bit more homely, I suppose, which is the feeling I was going for. So the first melody, all of the notes that are in this first measure follow the first chord. All the notes that are in the second measure follow the second, all the notes that are in the third. You get the idea. The second melody is very different. It goes all over the place. So the rest of the piece is in E flat natural minor. This part, this specific melody, is in E flat blues. So it's got that in there. Oh, here's the sheet music for the melodies if anybody's interested. Anyways, that's enough talk about music. Let's get back onto the subject of video games. We've got 5 days to go through. Tuesday was a very productive day. I added ranged weapons, including an ammo system, and I added the luck statistic, which determines things like how often monsters drop things, how often you'll find chests. I added the earth elemental, and I added a fountain, which is an interactable object that you find in a room sometimes that will give you either a random positive or negative effect, and that is also affected by the luck statistic. And I also added the bow weapon, which was the first ranged weapon, and the dagger weapon, which is a weapon that switches between ranged and not ranged based on how much ammo you have. So, I'm trying to get the dagger weapon to work, and the projectiles, they're a little funky right now. Wednesday was a much more technically oriented day. I added the player select room, where you can select, at that point it was only the main character, who I dubbed Charles, or Dev, who is short for developer, and it just has a developer weapon. And I also reworked the hierarchy of objects so I can be more specific when accessing data. And I redid Charles's sprite. So on Thursday I added the carnivorous plant monster, and I completely rewrote the weapon system so it allows for customizable damage for each weapon and customizable speed for each weapon. And I also added the weapon damage upgrade that is available in Forgehead's shop. However, on Friday I added another way to get these weapon upgrades. I added a new NPC called the Whitesmith, and he has a sword damage upgrade and a sword speed upgrade in his shop. And he also has like this white anvil that has this orange sparkly effect on it. And eventually I want to make that also be like a shop thing where you can get special modifiers for your sword, like it does poison damage or it sets enemies on fire or something. And I also added a new playable character, that being the Whitesmith. So another thing I want to do eventually is add a boss fight where you fight the Whitesmith, and if you beat him, you unlock him as a playable character. And I added a couple new monsters. I added the wood golem, the stone golem, and the gold golem. There's more to come soon. And I balanced the pricing for the weapon upgrades. So yeah, at this point, I've gotten pretty much all of the systems that I want implemented done, other than like what I was talking about earlier with the player poison and the player fire. I do want to add some other status effects, like I want the player to be able to be set on fire and the player to be able to be frozen, so that their speed goes down by like half. And that's really everything. I just need to focus on adding content and making each level distinguishable, because every time you go downstairs, all you really get right now is a score multiplier, and yeah, that's literally it. So that's probably what I'm going to focus on in the next week, unless I get distracted and start adding even more stuff and make the game more complicated than it has to be. So thank you for stopping by. I will catch you next week.